Hello everyone, hope you can hear me. It's a bit windy outside, so well, it's a short story today or tonight. I'm out here again in the park near my house. So today's story is going to be a very short story, the name of which is A Good Marriage, written by Stephen King. So I read this quite a while ago, but I still remember. I had to look up the characters, the names of the characters. I'll be honest with you. So there's the moon, and let's begin. So get comfortable, guys, with your coffee or just in bed or whatever. So, a good marriage. So what happens is, in this story, there is a couple. We begin with a couple, the Andersons, Bob and Darcy, or Darcy and Bob. So Bob has to move about concerning his business, so he is normally not at home. And Darcy's the housewife. They have kids. The kids have all gone, both of them have gone to colleges, and so she's home alone by herself most of the time. Now, one day, what happens is Darcy, while she's home alone one evening, she is working upon a small project in the living room, fixing a broken table and all that stuff, so doing some carpentry on her own, keeping herself busy. So she has to now go to the garage to find the proper screwdriver or the screws for the same. So she goes to the garage and looks for it. What she comes across is a magazine, an adult magazine. Yeah, and she hasn't seen that before in their house or in the garage. Well, she doesn't normally go in the garage without a reason. So this is the first time in so many years she saw a magazine, actually for the first time. So she obviously takes it that it belongs to Bob. The kids haven't been here for a couple of years now, and the magazine looks pretty, not that new, I would say, but pretty okay, in good condition. Now, she just, everyone has their vices and all that, so she just lets it go. She doesn't want to make a bigger show of that. It's just a magazine, so she lets it go. Now she's still looking for the screws, right? So she keeps searching, and all of a sudden, her hand disturbs some of the furniture, which opens up a small cabinet near the floor. So she sees that this particular cabinet has come out of its hinges, and so she bends down, actually goes on her knees to see what's inside. So she pulls it out, and to her surprise, she sees a woman's ID, a photo ID, with a name, and the name is Marjorie Duval. So this particular Marjorie Duval rings a bell. She has seen this girl's picture just a couple of months ago, but not in the right context. She saw her as a victim because she was murdered, and now she comes across this particular photo ID in Bob's possession. That is not so good, right? So this is where it all begins, actually. This is the moment where it all comes down. So she is obviously scared and doesn't know what to do, stressed out, and at the very same time, Bob calls. So she goes back to the house, takes the call, and she's obviously distressed or stressed or whatever from the finding, and Bob comes to know that there is something wrong in her voice, and he never found her that way. He never on any phone call was she this distressed or depressed, and he asks her many times what the reason is, but she just says it's a minor headache and all that stuff. So he puts one and one together. He's smart enough, so he thinks that maybe she has stumbled upon those secret things which she shouldn't have. So he's actually supposed to come home the next day, the following day, but he actually thinks that it would be wise for him to just cancel everything and drive back home. He's not that far, just a couple of towns over. So that's what he does, and he doesn't tell her though. So she's now sleeping and whatnot. She tries to sleep. After a while, she actually sleeps then. And then this guy comes home and sits beside her bed. He doesn't disturb her or whatever. He just sits there. Darcy wakes up in a while after some time. It's not quite morning time, it's like 4:30 maybe. To just find that her husband Bob is looking at her. And she doesn't know what to do. She is just scared, totally scared at this moment. So what would she do, right? I mean, he came home after all, and maybe he knows that she has found out. So that's the first thought that comes to her. And he then just asks her plain outright, without beating around the bush, that did you really find something, in the garage maybe, and this and that? And she breaks in. She says yes and whatnot and everything, and then he says, okay, well listen, Darcy, one thing you should know, that yes, it was me who did that, but and yeah, he admits, but let me just go back a little here, just 2 minutes back here, a few hours back here. Before she goes to bed, she does a thought comes to her that there were other murders by a serial killer who had actually also killed Marjorie Duval. So what if her husband was a serial killer and was linked to all these murders? But those killings were not had been done quite a while ago. So she goes on the computer before she sleeps. She tries to bring up Bob's business outings, the locations where he went, and tries to match the same with the dates of the killings. And to her surprise, the coincidence is unnerving. He had actually been out on business to the locations which were actually close to where the murder victims were found. So now it can hardly be a coincidence, right? At this stage, when you find that so many murders, like 7, 8 murders, and Bob was out of the house at actually those locations, very near to those locations. I mean to say, quite accessible. So that distresses her too much, and then she sleeps. Now we come back to Bob being in front of her. Now she accepts that yes, she came across Marjorie Duval's photo ID and whatnot, and then Bob says, okay, Darcy, listen. It did happen a few years ago that he and his friend, BD, who was actually mentioned as the serial killer. So BD is the serial killer. So now he's saying, Bob, that he and BD teamed up together and did what they did to all those girls. But that was quite a while ago. And the reason that they did that was because they had encountered girls, snooty girls, in school and high school, who would not give them, even a smile. So unkindly girls. So they wanted to teach such girls a lesson. And whenever they came across such girls, they obviously they murdered them. Well, it was not the way that a lesson should be taught. But he obviously regretted his actions after a while, after a few murders, and then he stopped. And the reason he stopped was because that he had a family to start with, Darcy, and he stopped for a while, for quite a few years. And then the reason that he committed this murder of Marjorie Duval just a couple of months ago was because this girl had to be taught a lesson. Because again, she was snooty, and she was not a girl, she was a big lady in her late 20s. And the other murders were teenagers. And so those were committed when they were in college, when BD and Bob were in college, high school girls and all that and whatnot. So that's what. So he admits, and then he says that if you want to go to the cops, you can. It's up to you. I will not say anything. And he's honest about it at that moment. So she believes him, because yes, at this moment, Bob is not playing her. Okay, let's get this straight. Bob is not playing her. He's not planning to murder her or anything. He leaves the ball in her court. So what she's now thinking, she knows that she has kids, and even if she gives Bob over to the police, her kids' lives will be ruined, because they will be faced with the constant fact, the kids, that their father was actually a serial killer, or is. So they will not have good careers down the line. So she had to think of her kids first. And as far as punishing Bob, she has that on hold. She has a sort of plan plan. Not at that very moment, but she says that, okay, Bob, I believe you on two conditions. The conditions are, one, you have to hide away Marjorie Duval's belongings, actually burn them so that nothing comes of it, you are not caught. And the second is that we are not longer going to have any physical interaction, no sex. Okay, so Bob agrees, because this is a sign that Darcy is, giving in or giving him some leeway here and trusting him. So actually, that's a good step in the right direction for him. So in the back of her mind, Darcy knows that she has to punish Bob somehow for his mistakes, because there are grieving families out there of girls whose parents don't know what happened to their bodies, what happened to them, why the murders, and what all, I mean, why the body was so mutilated. They know where the bodies are and all that, but why? Who did that? For what reason? So all these families grieving without knowing what the reason was, and the killer is moving around free. So what if her own daughter was killed by somebody and she didn't know what was happening? So she had to take the revenge whenever the opportunity presented herself. So time goes on and on. She and Bob doesn't get physically close for a while. Months pass by, and one day Bob has this hobby of collecting old pennies, rare pennies. So one day he comes across this particular penny which he had been looking around for a while, and then that calls for celebration in his books. So he and Darcy, after asking her a few times, she then relents and they go out for dinner. Bob is ecstatic with the coin and he drinks a lot, so he's actually drunk with the champagne, and they somehow stumble home. Sorry. So now a thought strikes Darcy that maybe this is the time that she can actually put her plan into action. And so she, when they come home, she asks Bob to get a glass of water or a bottle of water. So, and that she will be waiting upstairs for for sex. And that Bob is ecstatic to hear that finally he's getting somewhere with his life, and that Darcy has completely overcome her feelings and that they are perfectly on the go. So off he hops to get a bottle of water. Meanwhile, Darcy climbs the stairs and stands at the top of the stairs, waiting for him. Bob hobbles, slowly climbing the stairs, a step at a time, holding the rail, because he is downright drunk, and somehow comes to the top. And that is when she turns around and pushes him back down. Off goes Bob to the base of the stairs, breaks his neck, his hand and leg, and lies there in shock, but he isn't dead yet. So what does Darcy do? She climbs down slowly, sits at the bottom of the stair and looks Bob in the eye. And Bob just asks her why. She just smiles and she says, "You know why, Bob, you know why." She then takes a bag from the kitchen, smothers him and suffocates him. Plastic bag, and that's all that is for Bob. Now she then calls the ambulance in the hope that this all will be termed as an accident, and that is exactly what it is termed as when the medics come in. Everything is hushed, everything is normal. After that, the kids come, they grieve over their father and whatnot. Life moves on. A couple of months go by when a particular retired investigator comes home to Darcy. He is, he's just following a few old cases of BD, and he had his suspicions on Bob for a while. But when he was in force, he didn't have that solid evidence to pin him. So now that he knows that Bob has passed away, and gives a couple of months for the grieving family, and then he shows up. So sorry. So Darcy lets him in. He has tea and everything, and they sit down. And his name is Holt Ramsey. So Holt talks about his suspicions and asks her if she had any doubt whatsoever in her life with Bob. And she starts talking, and by the way she talks and her body language, she actually understands that she committed the crime. She actually killed Bob. And knowing that Holt knew that she did it, she then eventually gives in to his questionings and admits that she, yes, actually killed Bob. He comes closer to her, puts her hand on her shoulder like father, because this guy is very old, like 78, 80, 79 years. And he tells her that you don't have to worry anymore. You did the right thing. You gave all those girls and the woman justice, and also to the parents, by killing this guy. Because you just don't know with these guys. He can just go on killing after killing. He can again start after a year or a few months, and then we wouldn't even know if he actually killed somebody. So she did the right thing. So he then starts to leave. Then she calls him back and tells him about BD. And he says that yes, he knew about BD, and BD passed away in that the accident, the truck accident, and Bob was his friend, and Bob carried on. Now BD is Bob's friend, right? Or was Bob's friend, and his name was actually Brian Delahanty. So Brian Delahanty's short name is BD, B&D, Brian Delahanty. So BD is what Bob took up for himself, and he committed the crimes under the nickname called BD. So that was all Holt knew, she knew, and that's all mattered. Justice was done. A little too late, maybe, but had to be done sometime. And she got her opportunity, and she did the most of it, So that was a nice thing that Darcy did, and that brings us to the end of the story. So this is what Stephen King wrote in A Good Marriage. And if you guys want to hear something, some different story or a particular story, maybe a big book that you don't want to read, so just ask me, mention or comment put a comment below, and I'll come up with it. So thank you guys and girls for listening, and whatever comments you have to share, just write them and I will try to improve. Thank you. Have a good night. Bye bye.